Hello there. My name is Travis Broadbeck, and I work at CARES New York Inc. as the Operations Technology Specialist. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the presentation. We'll be investigating signs of racial disparity in the community by analyzing data entered into HMIS between 2018 and 2020. Let's go ahead and get started by covering the expectations for today. Today is just the starting point, and our goal is very big and important. Our objective is to come to an agreement with what the current status is of the community. Imagine this like the state of the COC address. We're just taking the first step in understanding where we are so we can figure out where we're going. And after today's presentation, we want to start asking specific and pointed questions that will drive lasting change in our community. By investigating these questions and learning more about the patterns in the data, we then can recommend process improvements and invest more resources in improving the community's operations. In just a moment, we'll go on to the executive summary, but first, let's cover the methodology. We're looking at 3 full calendar years of data entered into HMIS. We removed clients without race data, and we also removed clients that were less than 0 years of age or more than 109 years of age. And today, we're exclusively looking at HMIS admissions. That is when someone shows up at a program, is entered into the HMIS, and receives services. This data is not deduplicated because we're accounting for the total volume of admissions in the analysis rather than unique admissions. Here are the key points we can take from this descriptive analysis. First and foremost, there is an overrepresentation of Black or African American clients in the homeless system as recorded in HMIS, whether you compare it to the population of the HMIS admissions to the census population or to the poverty population recorded by the 2017 American Community Survey. Now, one thing I want to note here is we're seeing a lot of folks who are coming to the homeless system, and we're only seeing them at that moment. We don't get a chance to see what brought them to homelessness. So we need to consider that we can only do so much right now, and we'll address what we can inside the system. But please note that we will have to work with larger entities and partner throughout the community outside the homeless system to really make systemic differences and change. But first, we'll start with our own house programs and identify where we are and start asking questions and identifying patterns in the data where we can improve ourselves. Next, we also did see there was a pretty sharp decrease in clients with 2 or more races from 10% to 4% across 3 years. And we saw that the 3 most common project types were emergency shelter, homeless prevention, and day shelters. And we're happy to see that coordinated entry admissions increased greatly over the years. A lot more programs have been entered into HMIS for that. And lastly, we saw the greatest amount of need, or at least demand, by admissions in HMIS in 2019. In this first visualization, we're comparing the HMIS admissions between 2018 and 2020 to the census population and 2017 American Community Survey poverty population rates. We see that although white clients make up almost 80% of the community's population, 48% of all HMIS admissions were from clients who were Black or African American. The same conclusion can be drawn when you compare the HMIS population to the poverty population. And in both instances, there's an overrepresentation of Black or African American clients in the homeless system. To provide more context to the percentages provided in the prior slide, this only looks at the total number of clients admitted into HMIS between 2018 and 2020. And we can see that we admit more clients of Black or African American descent than white clients. But we also have a large population of clients of 2 or more races. Here we're looking at each of the HMIS admissions by year. And what we can see that each year we had more admissions of Black or African American clients than white clients. And we saw that our greatest amount of admissions were in 2019, which could be caused either by greater demand or more programs that are entering into HMIS. And across all 3 years, we saw that the 3 most common project types for admissions were emergency shelters, homeless prevention, and day shelters. And we'll look at the previous visualization year over year. And one thing I want to call out is the immense growth in coordinated entry admissions from 65 in 2018 to 624 in 2019. Another interesting point to call out is how homeless prevention was almost identical between 2018 and 2019. We did see an increase in rapid rehousing admissions in 2019. It was pretty dramatic. And we also saw the overall decline of transitional housing year over year, along with the overall decline of services-only programs as well. One caveat to take with this analysis is the impact of COVID-19. This chart shows that the number of missions recorded in HMIS decreased greatly between 2019 and 2020, telling us that there is data that we did not collect due to the pandemic, whether it was caused by not entering into HMIS or clients did not need to seek services at our programs. Furthermore, this is important because a lot of academic research and news reports state that the pandemic was worse for communities of color, and the fact that data collection was down during the pandemic, and some programs from the pandemic have yet to expire, like the eviction moratorium and other stimulus relief funds. We do not have the full story yet. So in other words, 2020 is skewed, and we're going to have to sit and wait over across 2021 and 2022 and even possibly 2023 to really see the impacts of the global pandemic. Now we're going to look at visualizations by project type. In this visualization, we're looking at homeless prevention. We can see that the number of new admissions of clients identified as 2 or more races fell sharply in 2020. We also can see that there is a fluctuation in the number of American Indian or Alaska Native client admissions in 2019 compared to the previous years, along with 2019 is the only year where more white clients were admitted than Black or African American clients. In this visualization, we see the decline in total admissions in services-only programs, year over year. However, across all 3 years, Black or African American client admissions exceed white client admissions. In street outreach programs, it appears we're seeing the impact of a new program in the community with the increase in total admissions each year. In street outreach, there is almost a 50-50 ratio between new admissions of Black or African American clients and of white clients. In our day shelter programs, we saw a decline in admissions in each year, but the most significant impact was seen in 2020. Now, we expect most of the impact could be from the COVID-19 pandemic, since it was a major variable that occurred during that window, because programs could have been at reduced occupancy and full capacity, clients would have been more hesitant to go to programs out of fear of getting sick, and stimulus programs and the eviction moratorium are all causes that this data could be skewed in 2020. This is another project type that also serves Black and white clients in almost equal numbers. In this chart, we're looking at our most popular program type, emergency shelters, where we see that the most dramatic changes over the 3 years is the change in new client admissions identified as 2 or more races. We saw that year-over-year decrease in that demographic. We also saw an increase in Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander clients and a decline in Asian clients year over year. Across all 3 years, admissions of Black or African American clients surpassed admissions of white clients. The Coordinated Entry Program is an emergent HMIS project in the community, and is another project type that has more admissions of Black or African American clients than white clients. One data point of interest in this visualization is the spike of clients identified as 2 or more races in 2019. In this chart, we're looking at rapid rehousing admissions, and the most interesting part of this visualization is 2019, because it is so different from 2018 and 2020. The increase in total admissions in this project type indicates that perhaps a new program was started or began entering into HMIS. And regardless of the cause of the change, we see that the variable dramatically changed the makeup of the client demographics in this program type. In permit-supported housing, we see a decline in new admissions for Black or African American clients year over year. In 2020, we see the sharpest decline, but we can likely attribute that to the pandemic and the related impacts that came with it, as we earlier discussed. We'll now look at 3 final visualizations before we wrap up. We're going to look at the interaction between race and gender, race and veteran status, and race and disabling condition. In this visualization, we're looking at gender, and what we can see is there are significantly more Black or African American males than Black or African American females admitted into HMIS. Whereas the gender ratio between white clients is a little bit closer to 50-50, where you can see that there are slightly more white males than there are white females. In this visualization, we see that out of more than 12,000 admissions, less than 600 of these admissions had clients identified as veterans. And of these clients identified as veterans, there were many more white veterans than there were of Black or African American veterans. This is important for us to investigate because clients who have a valid veteran status will have access to more program offerings inside and outside the community. Lastly, we're looking at disabling condition. Except for American Indian or Alaska Native and white clients, all other race groups had more client admissions with no disabling condition than with a documented disabling condition. And this is concerning because there is ample academic and community research that states that communities of color have less access to quality medical services. There is a potential impact of stigma when you think about substance abuse or mental illness, and other variables such as bad past experiences and just general hesitancy. The community should investigate if there are barriers to program entry for clients due to the lack of a documented disabling condition. Our data was accessed from HMIS Awards, the HUD Exchange for the 2017 American Community Survey, and the United States Census Bureau website for the census population. Thank you so much, and we look forward to your feedback.